Hey guys, welcome to week 5 of distance learning for A and P. I can't believe that we have gone this far, but here we are. So this week we have two things on the agenda. You're going to have two lectures from me this week, which is a little bit different than what we've done in the past. But we are going to split up the brain into two lectures, mostly just for time's sake. And then after this week, we are going to get a study guide, and next week we will cover everything for a review from the beginning of the nervous system, talking about the different types of nerve cells, how the neuron works, how action potential is done, and the parts of the brain, what it controls, and so forth. So that's what we have to look forward to in the next coming weeks. So today we are going to start on part 1 of the brain, and you will need your notes that look like this that I sent home with you. And you need to follow and fill in the blanks as we go along. Guys, I do not want you returning and turning in your notes. Those are for you. You're going to need them as a study aid, so make sure you're keeping them at home. Another friendly reminder, please put your name on everything that you turn in for class. Everything needs your heading. Your name, my name, subject, and date. Every single one of your classes need that. So please make sure you're doing that. So let's go ahead and get started on the brain. So we know we have two parts of the nervous system. We have the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Central nervous system we know makes up the spinal cord and the brain, but we also have connected tissue that helps us in the central nervous system, and they are broken up into 3 layers. So these structures are protected by 3 layers of connective tissue called manganese. Those 3 layers are the dura mater, which is the thick, tough layer, the arachnoid matter, which is the thin cobweb-like layer, and the pia mater, which is thin layer containing lots of blood vessels. We have more blood vessels that run through our brain and through our head than we do anywhere else in our body. So if you look at that on yours, you don't have to fill anything in, but I would like you to color yours to look like mine, so that way if you see it on a test, you can remember it by color. So you have our skin, and then underneath it, we've talked about periosteum, which is, remember, the outer cover of your bone. Then you have your bone, the dura mater, the arachnoid matter, and the pia mater. So between the arachnoid layer and the pia mater is the cerebral spinal fluid. This is one of your vocabulary words. What is cerebral spinal fluid? Well, it's the fluid that protects from contacting your skull so that you don't get abrasions on your brain. So the cerebral spinal fluid protects the brain by preventing it from contacting the skull. It also maintains the blood-brain barrier, which controls homeostasis of the brain and prevents infection. So if you ever get a head injury, this cerebral spinal fluid is what may be flowing at an accelerated rate, which can cause spinal or brain swelling. The cerebral spinal fluid produced in spaces within the brain are called ventricles. The cerebral spinal fluid is constantly being produced, circulated, and reabsorbed within these ventricles. We talk about this in every part of our system, that things are used for waste and things are reabsorbed and produced. We do this in our lymphatic system. We do this in our circulatory system. It's the same way with our cerebral spinal fluid in our nervous system. So as you can see up here, we have, these are the lobes right here that we're going to talk about in a bit. Okay, but we also have in the inner part of our brain ventricles. So we have the lateral ventricles, okay, cerebral spinal fluid, the brain, the skull, and then the 4th ventricle right down here, which stems from the 3rd and 4th stem from the pons area and the brainstem area, which we will get more into that for next lecture. So let's talk about the structure of the brain. Now on yours, it's going to look a little bit different in your notes. You have the areas that you need to fill in for your lobes is going to be on the back sheet. So you're kind of have to flip back and forth to figure out where you're going to be. So you should be right here on the cerebrum. Find it on your notes. What do we know about the cerebrum? It is the largest part of the brain. It's right here. Okay. It is divided into two hemispheres. We have the left hemisphere and we have the right hemisphere. And then it has that they have more specific names than left and right. We have the cerebral cortex, which is gray matter made up of cell bodies and dendrites. It controls conscious activity. And then we have intracerebral medulla, which is the white matter made of myelinated axons. One question I want to pose for you, and I want you to drop it in the comments after you watch this, is I want you to look up the difference between gray matter and white matter and how they affect our function, our human body functions. And just write 2 or 3 notes in the bottom of it, or 2 and 3 sentences in the notes section at the bottom, and let me know what you find out. So let's talk about the different lobes. The cerebellum is divided into 4 lobes based on their functions. There are names of parts of the skull protecting them. So remember when we did the skeletal system. The skeletal system had our bones of our skull. Well, the skeletal bones of our skull match the names of our lobes to our brain. So we have our frontal lobe, which is up here. We have our parietal lobe, which is right here, our temporal lobe, and our occipital lobe. So the frontal lobe is right here. It controls our voluntary movements like walking, moving our arms, running, all of that. Reasoning and decision making. So you remember when I say sometimes that your frontal lobe is not fully developed? It's because some of you make really dumb decisions sometimes. This is why. Okay, so your frontal lobe is the one that is reasoning and decision making, and it's actually not fully developed until the age of like 21, 22. So don't feel bad. That's just how you're made. It's also part of your memory is in your frontal lobe, usually like short-term memory, ability to predict consequences of actions. This part controls your conscience, guys, and your verbal communication. So your frontal lobe is very, very important. Now you should be on your notes, you have on the very back sheet the brain anatomy, and how you're doing this is that you are just filling in all of this area right here under each of the lobes. So whenever we go to the next lobe, you write those things that it controls down, okay? The parietal lobe, right here, parietal lobe, is responsible for visual and spatial processing and body position. So the parietal lobe works very close with your inner ear, and it helps control your body movements, your vestibular system. It also helps let you know about how many steps it needs you to take to get to a place. It helps you realize that whenever you're writing on a piece of paper, you need to skip lines. That's all happening in your parietal lobe. Occipital lobe, right back here. Occipital meaning vision, okay? It is the one that has visual processing vision and memory of objects. So there are times when we do really dumb things and and we can't remember where we put something, right? So last week, for example, my husband said, Courtney, where's the butter? I bought this really fancy butter because I'm dieting right now. And I said, I think it's in the fridge. Why wouldn't it be in the fridge? Well, when I was busy cooking, I got busy measuring my stuff and I put the um, butter in the utensils drawer. So it was in there with the measuring cups. And I was walking through the steps of, okay, I know I got a measuring cup out. I know I put the butter in the pan. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And then I opened up the drawer and there it was, sitting with all of my measuring cups. So my occipital lobe is the part that's really the one that's trying to retrieve that information. Whenever they say retrace your footsteps, it's your occipital lobe that's working to do that. Temporal lobe, right here on the sides of your brain. It is also part of memory, long-term memory. This is what happens with retrieval and recognition, helps you with comprehension and pronunciation of words, sensation of smell and sound, and emotional association of memories. So sometimes whenever I walk into a perfume or like a department store and I smell a specific perfume and it reminds me of my grandmother, that's going to be my temporal lobe working. If I'm learning to read at a kindergarten level and I can remember what the words look like and how to sound them out, that's my temporal lobe. And the temporal lobe at an early age develops very rapidly. It helps you guys decode your word. It helps retrieve information for your test. So doing brain things and keeping our brains engaged is actually strengthening our lobes and strengthening our neurons in our brain, and specifically our temporal lobe. So do those brain exercise, keep working. The cerebellum is this part down here at the bottom. It's this yellow part down here. And it is the second largest part of the brain. It is near the back of the skull. And it is responsible for the movements directed by the cerebrum so that they are graceful and efficient. So your cerebrum meaning all of your lobes, meaning all of your connections for your central nervous system have to go through the cerebellum in order for them to work gracefully. It's all involuntary, just like your heart rate. The cerebellum is the one that is decoding and sending out the information from your brain of what to do. After practicing a new sport or movement, the cerebellum aids in muscle memory. So let's take, for example, I'm learning how to shoot a basketball for the first time, and I dribble the basketball and I shoot. And I dribble the basketball and I shoot. And my form is just not doing very well until I start training my body to do it involuntarily. And it's because my cerebellum is what's teaching me to have that muscle memory to keep going and doing it the right way. This happens as an infant when we are walking. This happens whenever we are learning any, what's it called? When you're on stage, blocking for theater. All your cerebellum is the one that aids in all of that. Last portion today is the brainstem. The brainstem is located between the cerebrum and the spinal cord. It's this area right here, but it's actually broken up into 3 places, and that's what I want you to write into your notes. We have the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla oblongata, which is my favorite word in the nervous system, medulla oblongata. We're going to talk more specifically in part 2 of the brain, which will be your next lecture for this week. As always, guys, if you have any questions, please let me know. Just remember that you need to complete your worksheets this week and turn them in, and keep your notes at home for your study aid for your upcoming test on the brain and the central and peripheral nervous system. We hope you have an awesome day. Love you guys. Miss you.